I've been growing a lot more container plants because I've learned what to do right, which is not to use those bag soils that they push at the garden centers that have basically forested products in them, a lot of wood mulch, and also manures. Things that you should be feeding your trees with on the top, not putting their roots into. The problem with putting roots into decomposing type materials is the fact that it decomposes, right? It's going to actually shrink, so your plant's going to drop over time. It also rots the roots as those things break down. It causes heat. It also robs nitrogen. Lots of reasons why you don't want to put heavy organic material around a root ball. The three basic components for the media is sphagnum peat moss. It is organic but very, very slow to break down. I use volcanic rock. That allows for aeration. And then I use decomposed granite. You can also use sand instead of decomposed granite if you can't find that, coarse sand. And the sand, or DG, allows for drainage. So my typical ratio is 1 to 1 to 1 between peat moss, sphagnum peat moss, sand or decomposed granite. Either one works pretty well. And then volcanic rock. So of course you can play with the ratios. I don't like to have the peat moss more than 50% of the overall mix because, again, that's the one organic material out of the three that will eventually shrink. Again, it takes a really long time to do that, but I'd rather use more of my permanent soil media, but then still make this feasible to move around so it's not too heavy. So the picture you see in the right-hand corner, that's this plant less than 3 years ago when I first got it. And you can see how big it is now. We can definitely say that it's done well in the media that it's been in over the last 3 years. So it stands about 8 feet tall, and I've topped this quite a bit. You can see the trunk size on it. I'm pretty sure this is fully rooted, this container, at this point. So it's going to go into this container here, 25 gallon, and I got this from Greenhouse Megastore. So the pro on this one is it flexes, so it's not going to break on you. These handles, I don't think are going to snap like the rigid plastic does. But the downside is because it flexes so much, it's very, very difficult to try to lift these things off the ground. When I went to Lowe's, they didn't have my normal sphagnum peat moss that I get. I had to buy this more expensive sunshine mix, number 4. This 3 cubic foot bag costs $40. It is not cheap, but it is an alternative to just straight sphagnum peat moss if you can't find that. Just in contrast, this straight peat moss runs around, I think, $26 or $27, so quite a bit cheaper for the same volume. So the difference with this over straight peat moss is you can see this is a blend, so it has 60 to 70% peat. It also has perlite in it. Perlite is a type of volcanic rock, but I don't find it to be as permanent as something that's larger, like, let's say, lava rock, which is what we're going to use. Perlite over time can, number 1, float to the top and out of your container, so I don't like that aspect of it. And the other aspect is it can get smaller. It can shrink up as it gets compressed over time. So this isn't really ideal. I wouldn't spend more for this. It's just what I happen to have. What I do like that this has in it over just straight peat is it has a wetting agent. If you've ever worked with dry peat moss, you know it gets very hydrophobic and it's hard to work with and rehydrate once it goes dry. So I like that this stuff is easier to work with because it does have that wetting agent in it, so it does not go hydrophobic on you. Alright, good old decomposed granite. Again, you can use rough type of sand, like building sand, instead if you can't find this. It's very similar to that product. It's a coarse sand essentially, and it has bits of aggregate in it. I like it a little bit better than sand as far as a container mix because it holds on to water a little bit more than sand, and that's beneficial in the summertime when temperatures are 120 degrees. I don't have to water more than once. a day. Alright, so this red lava rock I've seen at my big box stores in the past. Problem with it is it's fairly large pieces in general. What's nice is the newest batches that I found are quite small. Not exactly 5/8 of an inch, and you know, the pieces vary, but this is a pretty decent size to work with. You don't want anything too big. And at $6 a bag, this is a really economical option for a permanent volcanic rock in your container mix. Another type of lava rock you can go for, and this is on the costly side, this is the volcanic rock that American Fireglass puts out. It's their smallest form, and you can see it's quite tiny. This is the ideal type of mix that you want. And you can see volcanic rock is really porous, so that's what allows that oxygenation. When you water your plants, you'll actually see bubbling occur because there's so much oxygen there. So this stuff costs quite a bit. This little tiny bag, 10-pound bag, cost me $15 off Home Depot online. Can't find this stuff locally, so that's a whole lot more expensive than this, you know, almost 3 times the cost. But just some alternatives. You know, you can also just go with perlite. I just am not fond of it for a really long-term solution because, like I mentioned, it will shrink on you too. Here we can see our mixed up media. It does have that 30 or so % volcanic rock in the sunshine mix. So we have more than a third overall volcanic rock, even though I put in roughly a third of each volume of these 3 materials. Wanted to show you the bottom of the root ball here. You can see that the roots are all kind of congregating here and spiraling. They're not going up over the sides, so it's not root bound at this point. Up potting every year tends to prevent your plants from going root bound if you appropriately pot them up into the right size. But if I'd left this for another year, this would have developed an issue. So it's definitely the right time to graduate this up. so we can see the end result. This tree is going to be much happier. It's got more height in that pot, with a good amount of soil to grow in. Here was what it was in by comparison. So this should do well for it for at least another year, maybe 2 years. I can get away with this before I start having issues with the roots. I encourage, if you're having issues with your container plants where they die on you and you're using the traditional soils that the big box stores push, give this a shot. Seeing is believing. Try it for yourself, just as an experiment on one plant, especially if you live in a warm climate like Phoenix, Arizona, where the summers demand frequent watering to keep your plants alive. As always, thanks for watching and happy gardening.